Talking about Matplotlib.
Hi, good morning. So this is sort of a Matplotlib status report kind of presentation. And I'm going to start right up front with some thank yous. I want to thank Space Telescope, my employer, who still allows me a percentage of my time to work on Matplotlib. We just a couple weeks ago got a donation from the Simula project led by Hans-Peter Langtangen for $10,000. So we have a little money to play around with. Maybe I don't know what we're going to do. We're talking about it tonight at the BOF. So if you're interested in how we can spend that money, show up, please. And NumFocus has, over the years, provided us with travel expenses and hosting costs and some continuous integration money. This is the list of all the people who've contributed to the last release. So this is just in the past 6 months. All these people have at least one commit in the source code repository. It's an amazingly long list with some very talented people on it. Unfortunately, there's one name that, of course, is conspicuously absent. We lost our fearless leader last year. I think over the past year since taking over the project, I have grown a incredible and immense respect and appreciation for what John Hunter was able to do. I get paid for my time at my day job to work on Matplotlib, and I find it overwhelming. He was, I think, at least certainly, in recent years, had a very intense full-time job, and then was still finding time to manage releases for Matplotlib, triage bugs, and be involved. It's really gargantuan, and it's really amazing what John Hunter did. And we are moving on despite this, but it's a great loss, and I don't want to say too much more. I'm going to get choked up, but wonderful guy. When I first met him in 2007, he was working for a financial company. Of course, his background is in neuroscience, so he was sitting there in the corner at a PyCon conference with this big, thick binder of numbers, basically, and he's, paging through it. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, I'm trying to figure out what the heck we're doing. You have to keep in mind, this is 2007 in the financial sector. Things were complicated. I don't know if he realized at the time, but he says, "I gotta understand this stuff. I feel I owe it to them. I'm probably just going to plot it all, and then I'll know what's going on." Anyway, I just thought it was, interesting. So anyway, here's sort of how we're doing. I think one important metric of how we're doing is the number of individuals that are interacting with the project. So it's not just the lines of code and the amount of progress, but it's how many people are compelled enough by Matplotlib to come to us through the mailing lists or the various channels. So I think this graph is interesting in some ways. We have two mailing lists. We've always had a user list and a developer list. The user list, since about 2010, has really tanked down, and I was really concerned about this until I noticed Stack Overflow, which is the cyan line there. It just through the roof. This is where people are asking questions about Matplotlib, is Stack Overflow. I actually have never interacted with Stack Overflow. It comes up in my Google searches now and again, but it's, for those of you that are not using Stack Overflow and have projects, make sure you're aware of it, because that's, I think, where a lot of people go for answers to questions. And then the other interesting one you see is that the developer list is on the decline a bit, but I think that's because GitHub issues and pull requests and all that kind of takes over what used to be done on mailing lists. This is also a fascinating graph. This is the number of unique contributors per month over time. And because Matplotlib is such an old project, we have data going back. It actually goes back a little bit further, but it was sort of less interesting. But you see, we'd average about 10 different contributors at any different time. These people kind of change in and out. People sort of show up for a while, scratch their itch, and then leave for a while, and other people come in. But when we went to GitHub, which is that dotted line, through the roof, the number of people that are actually submitting code to Matplotlib, increases almost, two to threefold. It's really something. So GitHub didn't pay me any money to say this, but it's really an amazingly powerful tool in terms of getting participation. Now, there's still kind of a long tail of developers. Note that this is a log-scaled graph, okay? So we still have a handful of people who are in the, 100 to 1,000 commit range. This is each line is just in a particular year. But you do see that thickest line in 2012. The tail is fattening out. We're getting more and more people, committing more than one commit over time. And that's really what I'd like to see. I'd like to see, sort of a flattening out of that line as much as possible, getting, more people so the burden isn't on, the precious few as much. And then this last graph, I promise this is the last graph of the talk, other than showing off Matplotlib, which does graphing. So I guess I shouldn't have made that promise. This is just the number of lines of code that have changed per month over time. And it obviously tends to go in waves. There was a major refactor around 0.98, you see. And then there was another major refactor when we went to Python 3. But it is sort of trending, increasing over time. So it's not a stagnant project. It really is still changing and adapting, and we're making pervasive changes on a regular basis still. Okay, so now what can you expect in 1.3? We have a 1.3 release candidate out. It still has a couple known issues, so there may be one or two more release candidates before the final release. We really got caught by the setup tools craziness that went on a couple weeks ago. But I'll just go through some of the new features that you can expect. And I encourage everyone to download that release candidate and find more issues in it before we put out the final. We have a new feature for event plots. So these are sort of time series event data. And it has all kinds of features for putting them in 2 dimensions. And there's new triangular grid interpolation. This is really cool stuff. So if you have a triangular grid, it can interpolate and then do a contour plot on it. Stackplots can now have different kinds of baselines. So you can, rather than just always saying the baseline is at 0, you can say the baseline is centered around 0. You can say it's beneath 0. All kinds of different flexibility. You can now have independent alpha for the edge and face color. Used to be whenever you had an object, there was a single alpha for both. But now if you want to have your fill be semi-transparent, but your outline be solid, you can do that. It actually opens up a lot more flexibility. It sounds like a minor point, but it's very pervasive throughout the system. It's really nice to have that fixed. It's now easier to make a custom color map. You see, just showing the line of code there, you can basically just give it a list of colors and how it works, and it's far easier than it used to be. We've done a lot of house cleaning on this latest release. We've sort of trimmed off some of the legacy stuff. No longer works with Qt version 3. You have to have at least 4. 5 is already here, and that's the new challenge we'll have to address. FLTK, which is not really maintained anymore, is gone. Enhanced meta file, it's a Microsoft-specific format, is gone. NXUtils, which was kind of a drop box for a bunch of things that are now in NumPy or SciPy, is gone. Printing support, we used to have printing support in the WX backend. It didn't get used a lot, it didn't work very well, and none of the other backends had it, so we just got rid of it. And then there was some code in there for saving and loading text files that now we're pointing people at NumPy, save text and load text. You can now do path effects on lines. Path effects are this way of sort of given a single path, doing a bunch of, rendering another one beneath it or moving it around and stuff. And this becomes the basis for the xkcd support that's now built in. So there was this notorious blog post by Jake last year, and a bunch of people kind of came up with different solutions for this. But what ultimately ended up is something that kind of works for virtually everything. And it's one line of code to turn this on. You just say plt.xkcd, call that function, and it switches a bunch of things on to make this happen. So there's this is a recreation of an actual xkcd comic, but what's kind of fun about it is it works on any graph. And thanks. So even these complicated sort of Sankey diagrams, they can look hand scribbled. And then we even took our website and redid the whole thing in xkcd. If you go to the gallery, no, I'm sorry. I think what I want is this one. Oh, sorry. I've got to scroll down a bit. So all these things here on the gallery are redone. This is kind of a fun one. How do I get back? Okay. So anyway, check that out. That's the URL. Matplotlib.org xkcd is the custom version of the website. Yes, there you go. That's right. The other fun feature is there's now this thing called the WebAg backend, which is a backend that works in the browser. And how it actually works is by sending difference images from Matplotlib to the browser, and it can send mouse clicks and key events back to Matplotlib. It works completely standalone. You don't have to use IPython. It'll fire up its own Tornado server and just work if you set WebAg backend, and then you say show. It starts up the server. It'll open your web browser automatically if you configure it to do that. There's also sort of a proof of concept IPython integration. There's some reasons why it's not kind of going to work as it stands, because it communicates directly from the web browser to the kernel, which is kind of a no-no in I think how IPython is architecting itself. But the proof of concept is there. Once we get all the kinks worked out, it really should work. So I'll give a quick demo of that. So this is a double jointed pendulum example, and this is demo. Shoot, this was just working this morning. Wouldn't you know? It's on my local machine. I don't know if. Yeah. This is my machine. Yeah, the notebook wouldn't work. All right. Well, what you would see. Yeah, that's no. If it uses the repr HTML to pop it up. Yeah, let's try restarting the kernel. That's right. That's right. Okay. Yeah. It's the comment was it's the Windows solution. Restart the kernel. No, I'm sorry about this. Let's see if I. Yeah. So there is IPython integration. I think just to show you an example, I'll fire this up in. Oh no, that's not going to work either. I'm just going to have to bail on doing a live demo on that. I think it's a shame. Come see me after. It does work. So you get it would pop up a window. You have all of the standard toolbar options. So you have panning and zooming. You have the history of the limits right there. Animation works. So if you're writing a plot that has an animation, it will send the frames in real time. Mouse events work, so you can scroll around. It's a very cool demo. I'm really sorry it's not working. I had to set up a virtual machine because obviously this isn't the master of, a virtual M, because this isn't the master of Matplotlib. It may just be that for some reason I'm picking up master at the moment. Okay. So there's a host of other smaller improvements in there. You have different kinds of color bar extensions. There's fixes to box plot. The background color is now handled correctly. You can truly do transparent plotting, which is very important now. The tight bounding box support, thanks, which prevents you from having things that float outside of the bounds of the image, works much better. Text anchoring and alignment. So now when you output text to SVG, the baseline of the text is actually in the right place. The save dialog box will remember the last directory you visited. There's an entirely new setup and configuration infrastructure. So we now use setup tools. We don't ship pure Python dependencies. We expect pip or other tools to get them for you, or the Windows and Mac packagers still include them, but they sort of do that at the packaging end, not at our source tree. And just numerous bugs have been filed, and I think Phil Elson and Damon McDougall deserve a special shout out for the number of bugs that they've triaged. Oh, sorry, as well as Eric Firing. These people have just worked really hard on getting that list of issues down. It's still very high and always probably will be, but sorting through it has been really helpful in this last release. The other thing we've introduced over the past year is Matplotlib enhancement proposals. We've discovered that it's very hard on such a large and mature project to get out of maintenance mode. You spend a lot of time just dealing with bug reports, adding new features, tacking on new features that people want. And it's hard to sort of step back and say, what are some fundamental architectural things that are holding us back that we should fix? So the idea of MEPs was to have something that goes beyond just filing an issue on GitHub, something that requires more discussion and more involvement, before moving forward. So these are the currently active MEPs. We have a couple that have finished. Nel Veracqua wrote and is working on improving PEP 8 compliance. A lot of that has already been done and is in 1.3, but we're still over time kind of just moving our code base to PEP 8. The interactive artists PEP is about making sure that you can change artists after they've already been created. Some of them you can, some of them you can't. It's sort of this weird inconsistency. Some things, aren't very updatable after the fact. Nel Veracqua is also working on modernizing the documentation. We're going to move to the NumPy doc format. We're going to get rid of having giant web pages that scroll down for miles, separating out things into smaller pieces. And a bunch of others, just sort of consistency things. Matplotlib was one of the first projects to plow ahead with Sphinx, and I think the way wasn't quite there yet, so we're trying to catch up to how Sphinx is used by most other projects. Tony Yu's been working on reorganizing the gallery. It's sort of this unorganized mishmash, but he's been moving things around, putting things into categories that are more meaningful, taking out some of the examples that were really unit tests that aren't useful to end users and things like that. There's a MEP for using Python properties. This is probably one of the most controversial ones. For me, it's not really about changing the syntax, because I don't really care if I'm typing set this versus this equals something. What I think the important part of that work is going to be validating things early, because a big problem in Matplotlib is you'll set up your plot and you'll pass in something, and then 5 or 6 lines later, when you're finally drawing the plot, you get this exception because you passed in something that was invalid, and it's very hard to connect one to the other. So having things that get validated really early, and also being consistent about when you can change things after an object's been created. It would be nice if everything can. It's probably not feasible if everything can, but that's something we want to move toward. And then we also have a MEP for improving our text handling. We have sort of a built-in text renderer and a LaTeX text renderer, and it's kind of strewn about through the whole code base, and I'm planning to sort of add a concept of text engine backend so we could have those two and then add another without having to strew that about the whole thing. So anyway, join us tonight at 7 o'clock for the Matplotlib BOF. We're going to be talking about these MEPs and maybe adding new ones. I don't know the room. Does anyone know the room? Phil or Damon, if you're here? It's probably, we may do it off-site. Well, that's right. It was originally scheduled for 12:20. It's moved to 7 o'clock because of a conflict. Yeah, yeah, we'll do that. We'll write it on the boss board exactly where it's going to be. And I'm out of time, so I'm just going to show this without describing what it is, and I hope you'll come find me after. This is doing all of the rendering with Numba. No more C++, no more ag, Numba rendering, Python from top to the bottom. Just an experiment, but some way of, the advantage of having Python top to bottom, of course, is you can change the transforms at any point. You don't have to worry about how efficient it's going to be or not. It's really cool. Numba is awesome, and I want to thank Mark Florison for helping me get this demo up and running. Anyway, that's my talk. I wish I had a little more time, but thank you. Okay. Yes. To repeat the question, is the WebAg backend in? Well, it's in master, and it will be in 1.3. That could be it. Let's see if that's what it is. Hold on. Yeah, or I can even just do this, I think. Let's see if that does it. No, that wasn't it. Something else. Anyways, thanks for the suggestion. But also to clarify what I thought your original question was, the WebAg backend will be in 1.3. The piece that won't be, most likely, is the integration with IPython, because that's kind of an ongoing. Other questions? Jake? Yeah, the question was, there's some Matplotlib RCs files floating around that give it a more modern look. Have we considered those? I certainly have. I haven't seen an issue be filed. It would be great to either change the defaults or maybe ship some of these with Matplotlib and maybe provide an easy way to switch between them. I know that there is an issue or a proposed MEP to sort of make it easier to create color cycles or pattern cycles in Matplotlib, and I think this could be sort of related to that. I've thought for a long time that Matplotlib should support CSS, so that you could just CSS style your plots and people could share CSS files, and that would be really cool, but it's a big project, obviously. The question was, is Jake suggesting that xkcd should be the default? We can take a poll. Yeah, question. mplot3d is part of the Matplotlib source code, and it's still being maintained. It has some known shortcomings. The main one is that it doesn't handle z-order correctly. So certain kinds of plots, obviously, where things don't show up in the back when they're supposed to be in the back. But it works, and it's still being maintained, and we welcome contributors to improve it. Yeah.
Does Matplotlib have a functional plotting API where you can pass Python function and give it a range of arguments?
I think Damon is working on. The question is, does Matplotlib have a functional interface where you can give it a Python function, for example, and have it plot that function? It doesn't at present, but there's an open pull request that's being worked on. Am I right, Damon? Yeah. So, yeah, just to repeat, I just shortly paraphrase what Damon said. It's being worked on.
All right, I think that's all the time we have.
Okay. Thank you.